Trump handed the Russians a bunch of victories today. You know, when when the truth finally comes out about how much Putin owns Trump's ass, I don't know. I would think that Trump would be put on trial, you know, fuck impeachment, put on trial and charged with. I know treason is a heavy duty word. I know that nobody wants to use it, but what the fuck do you call it when a presidential candidate specifically and deliberately sells out the country? What do you call that? Chicken soup? No, you call it treason. The only one who's happy with Trump's decision to pull out the remaining U.S. military, about 2,000 soldiers, from this battle against ISIS, this American military presence in the Syria, Turkey, Iraq triangle of horror and death. The only one happy about it is Putin, who congratulated Trump today on a wise decision. Trump tweeted this morning, quote, "Despite what the fake news says, Russia is not happy." Moments earlier, Putin had praised Trump for retreating. Putin said during his year-end news conference in Moscow, quote, "On this, Donald is right. I agree with him." This is so insane because I know that Trump is a moron. And he does shit like this simply to say to anybody who might criticize him, go fuck yourself. I'm the president. I'll do what I want. But this is so insane. I said the other day, it wasn't so long ago that I was advocating for the United States to bring home all of its military forces. But I said from bases. I'm not trying to hedge what I said. I mean, I said what I said, and I stick to it. We should not have military forces in 80 or 90 military bases in 80 or 90 different foreign countries. No, we shouldn't. But where it concerns the Middle East, which is where the final battle is probably going to begin, I mean, let's face it, where it concerns the Middle East, where we at least this fight against ISIS, this terror group that not only beheads people, but also crucifies them. Because we have worked with the Kurds, who happen to be probably the best fighters in the Middle East, the most courageous. They have their own agenda. They would like to see a Kurdistan eventually. The Turks are poised to wipe them out as soon as the United States leaves. Now, the Turks and the Kurds fighting will be something that I don't think we have seen since the Turks fought the rest of the world in World War I. It will be a, pardon the cliche, bloodbath. And the Turks, Erdogan, the dictator of Turkey, is just, he can hardly contain himself that he'll have a chance to remove the Kurds, who have been insisting that part of northern Iraq and eastern Turkey, there's a section there, and belongs to them, the Kurds. And Erdogan is just waiting for a chance. The only thing that has stopped him from eliminating or trying to eliminate the Kurds has been the United States. And now Trump is pulling us out. Russia is happy as a pig in shit that Trump has decided to do this, because Russia is Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator's most powerful ally. Putin has propped al-Assad up since 2015 by stationing more troops inside Syria and actually having a base in Syria, more troops the United States ever committed to this horrible war of attrition that's been going on between al-Assad as he slaughters hundreds of thousands of his own people. Talk about a bloodbath. God damn. And experts, including those inside the Trump administration, as well as across the entire ideological spectrum in this country, left, right, up, down, it makes no difference. They all agree that Putin is just smiling and salivating because his boy Trump is doing exactly what Putin is telling him to do. And this will enable the Russians to expand their sphere of influence on the ground in that section of the country, of the world. This Victoria Nuland, who was the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs under Obama, said today, quote, Moscow is celebrating. She is now the chief executive of the Center for New American Security. She said this, Victoria Nuland said this, quote, after years of pretending to negotiate a diplomatic solution to the Syria crisis with Washington, Putin can now ignore the entreaties of Trump's envoys because the United States will have no military skin in the game to back its diplomacy. This was in an op-ed she wrote. The Kremlin, she went on, will proceed as it has long planned, consolidating control over the west of Syria for Assad until 2021, and then rigging an election for a new figurehead. Moscow will be too smart to expand its own ground presence in Syria and will instead broaden its tacit support for the Iranian-backed militias that already serve as de facto local police forces in western Syria. Maybe it will allow Tehran to split the spoils from the Deir al-Zur oil fields. Maybe all that cash will go back to Moscow. End quote. Trump is such a fucking gangster. He is Now, to be clear, Syria isn't the only reason Russia is celebrating the fact that Trump is doing what Putin is telling him to do and then patting him on his ass for doing it. According to the New York Times' Ken Vogel, quote, the Trump administration announced yesterday that it intends to lift sanctions against the business empire of Oleg Deripaska, one of Russia's most influential oligarchs, after an aggressive lobbying campaign by Mr. Deripaska's companies. The decision by the Treasury Department, which has been postponed for months, was both politically and economically sensitive. Mr. Deripaska and his businesses, including the world's second largest aluminum company, were hit with sanctions in April in retaliation for Russian interference in the election and other hostile acts by Moscow. So Trump is going to remove the sanctions. It wasn't interference in our election. It was assistance in our election to Trump. The companies responded with a sophisticated multi-million-dollar lobbying and legal campaign seeking to delay and ultimately remove the sanctions in exchange for promises from Mr. Deripaska to give up majority ownership and control of the holding company that controls the world's second largest aluminum company. None of that last part means shit to me, and it probably shouldn't to you either. The name of that country is Rusal, Russia Aluminum, Rusal. Representative Lloyd Doggett, a Texas Democrat who has criticized the administration for being soft on Rusal, said the move to lift sanctions amounted to Mr. Trump sliding another big gift under Vladimir Putin's Christmas tree, saying that the plan appears to be a shell game brokered by a sanctioned Russia bank, which I'm sure heavily was invested into Trump, VTB, involving one of Putin's closest buddies. Doggett said, quote, "It only encourages Putin to pursue his destabilizing activities around the world." Do you understand here? I mean, is this too much information? Do you understand what's going on? I have to sit and read this shit 2 or 3 times before it dawns on me that we have a president of the United States that, for the reasons we still don't know yet, is slowly and methodically and deliberately selling this country out to the Russians. I can remember saying a long time ago that when we finally did get a proto-fascist regime, which is what Trump's organization is, that the only thing that would stop this country from going completely fascist, and it would probably only be a temporary stop, would be a military coup, where the United States military does something that they've never done before. And that is actually rising up and saying to the President of the United States, talk about 7 Days in May, the movie, but saying to the Putin administration, we're not carrying out your orders any longer. In fact, we are going to assist you in governing the country. I don't think we're very far away from that. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. You have your choice. You can listen to the ranting with the audio podcast or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.